Hello and welcome to another episode of Feeding Fatty. I'm Roy.
And I'm Terry.
And of course, this podcast just chronicles our journey, my journey, Terry supporting, helping me through the weight loss, getting healthy, getting exercise. And, we are up and down and all over the place. And so, we have guests on from time to time to come in, help us with different perspectives, their opinion. Some are going through what we are going through as well. Today, actually, you are our first repeat guest, so that is an award, I guess, that we'll have to hand out. First repeat
That's
guest.
right.
She is our scientist next door, Dr. Nicole Garneau. Now, she is recognized as one of the top 5 influential young professionals in Colorado in a 2020 Civico Governor's Fellow and serial entrepreneur. So Nicole, thanks again for taking time out of your day. It's really a good story. We met a few months ago, talked. The original message we wanted to have you on was for this, but after talking, we decided to go with the mindset and mindfulness and the 5 tips, to your mental health fitness. And so wanted to have you back. So today we're going to talk about, there are, I guess, 5 identified tastes, and you think that you have uncovered the 6th one. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I do know you are the curator of a museum. And so you tell us a little bit about your history and your research on this topic.
That sounds great. Thank you for having me back. I will take the award. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Either that or you're a glutton.
Maybe Terry will take me with her to Hawaii.
I will do it. Come on.
That's right.
Y'all would never come home if I let y'all go out there together.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I spent the last 10 years, I guess I left the museum a year ago, but I was there for 10 years at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And I was the curator and chair of the Health Sciences Department. Okay. And for folks who aren't quite as familiar with science museums, just like art museums, they have curators, and those curators in science museums are responsible for doing research and having these collections that usually come from their research in order to hold for the public good. And so it's a little unusual for a natural history museum to have someone who studies modern human biology. And that is what I did there. And I specifically studied taste and how taste is really a function, just like all of our senses are, of survival and the evolution of the human species. Okay. So it was a really great way for us to think about that humans are not separate from nature. We are part of nature. And just like all the other animals and species, we have evolved as well. And so I specifically studied how humans experience taste.
Okay. So the 5 tastes are
sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. So those are so I joke around that it's kind of like for golf fans out there, it's kind of like getting the green jacket. Like those are the ones that have green jacket. Like they're the masters. Everyone accepts them. They're great. And then there's a lot of other really cool possible tastes out there that is starting to gain a lot more scientific evidence that it actually exists. So I think it might be worth me talking about how a taste, for the most part, gets defined as a taste.
Okay.
And part of this is because a lot of times people confuse taste and smell. Different senses, different sensory organs. So tongue and soft palate have these receptors, which are like locking keys for the most part, that are for taste, versus smell, which is in your olfactory cavity, basically, in your olfactory bulbs. Again, you have those receptors, those locks and keys, but for molecules that are aerosolized and are going to go to different parts of the brain. So this is really important. So that's one of the things we need to understand in our senses, and particularly when thinking about taste. One, when you have that in your mouth, do you perceive it? Is there something that you're perceiving? Okay. 2, so that's like the first one. That's like sour. Everyone agrees sour has a green jacket. Sour is a taste. It's been around forever. Everyone agrees. You know you're tasting something acidic. So perception. And then from there, you have to start digging in deeper. Molecular biologists want to understand, cell biologists want to understand, do we know the cells in the sensory organ that host and are the homes of those lock and key receptors. Okay, so now we're starting to get into process. And those receptors, or those locks and keys, the shape of them matters. And the shape of them comes from our genetics. So our genetics is just, our human genome is just a cookbook for our body. Cookbook has recipes. The human genome cookbook has genes. And they do the same thing. The recipe tells you how to make something. The gene tells you how to make something. And just like maybe Roy, your mom's recipe for maybe chocolate cake is a little bit different than someone else's. Same thing, our genes are a little bit different. So we all have the same genes. All of us have the same genes, about 25,000 genes or recipes in our cookbook.
Okay.
These little tiny changes and these little like 0.1% differences that make us unique in ways we can see and ways we can't see. And one of the ways we can't see is taste. So it changes the shape of that receptor. So let's bring it back. You put something in your mouth, right? All right, listeners, you're eating something. You're perceiving it. Why am I perceiving that? That's cool. I'm perceiving it. Down at the tiny, tiny level, those little tiny food molecules are breaking up and are interacting with your tongue by kind of being like a key that's coming in and unlocking that lock. And when that happens, a signal goes to the brain and the brain is perceiving it and the brain makes the decision. Do you want to eat more of it or do you not want to eat more of it?
Okay.
So for sour, we know we have a perception and excuse me. And we don't really know the genes, really. We have an idea about what this receptor looks like, but we don't really know. But guess what? Sour gets a green jacket. Okay, salty, same thing. We're close, but we don't quite understand totally how salt is working in humans. It's got a green jacket. Umami, which is savory taste of protein. Sweet, which we're all familiar with, is the taste of sugar.
Oh, yes.
We can all agree on that. We know that one. And bitter, bitter, which is a taste of particular molecules that usually associate more with historically poison, although we know there's a lot of things that are bitter that aren't poisonous that are very good for us, like cruciferous vegetables. We understand the genetics of that. So we understand the recipe or the gene. We understand what it makes and what it looks like. And we understand how that connects in those taste cells and how the taste cells then connect to the brain. And we know where it goes in the brain.
Okay.
So those ones are like the standards. So we're like, okay, those guys, they got it. So on in comes new guys. So if we had to throw it out there, and I wonder what your listeners would think right now, what are some things that people are like, well, why isn't that a taste? Is that a taste? What about this? Is that a taste? So what kind of things would you guys think about that could be tastes?
Fat.
Fat. What else?
I don't know. Sugar and salty are the two for me.
I love them all.
They fall. Sugar, salty, or no good. So.
So there's some preliminary evidence that's growing for a couple other ones. Certain minerals, like calcium, the pure taste of water, which would have helped us evolutionarily for sure. Although then you become, is it devoid of something and therefore it's pure, or is it your taste of pure? So there's less evidence for water. And then fat. And that's the one that I worked on for a few years as part of my tenure at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And that was through a partnership with Purdue University. And I worked with a scientist there, Rick Mattis, and he has been working on fat taste for 30 plus years.
Wow.
And there's a few other folks in the industry in terms of the field of taste research who have also been trying so hard to get forth enough evidence that the taste of fat would be considered the sixth taste. So that's what I thought we could dive into today, or about that.
Interesting.
Before we get too far off, just a couple questions that I had thought about while you're talking. Number one is, can your taste or your smell throw the other one off? If something smells like something and then you get in your mouth, not what you thought. But then the other thing is, are our tastes genetically pre-programmed? Are they learned, or is it some combination of those? Because some people like sweet, some people like, prefer sweet, prefer salty. Because the other weird thing is we've had this conversation many times, like the big pickles that are sour. Okay,
Love
and
those.
she loves them. She put some pickle juice in something we were drinking, and it made me think like, okay, so back when we were kids, after you played a baseball game, you got a free
Yep.
snack. Well, the pattern I noticed even then is, the boys would get the snow cone or piece of bubble gum or something like that. Girls always got those sour pickles, and I just never could stand the taste. So I know that's a whole lot of information,
Oh
but
yeah.
it almost seemed like there was some genetic line that was drawn there.
Yeah, give me a dill pickle
Me too.
snow cone with a little bit of lime on. Oh my goodness, I am in heaven.
See, Terry, we got to go Hawaii. This is
Let's go.
oh man.
Come on.
All right. So let's bring it back.
Uh,
Right out of the gate, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, we probably put the cart before the horse, because we started diving directly into a deep dive of how taste works. But I think we want to bring it back to how humans perceive flavor as a whole.
Okay.
And let's
Okay.
break it down from there, because some of the questions you just asked for are going to be answered when we look at it from that perspective.
Okay.
So the first thing is flavor in the brain. Flavor is just a perception of reality. And that perception leads to a behavior. So let's think about it from that point of view. So now, where is the brain getting its clues to have this perception of reality? Right out of the gate, we know that it's going to be coming from the senses. So our 5 senses play a huge role, of course, in figuring out how our brain is perceiving the flavor of something we're eating or drinking. And that's everything from before you even put something in your mouth, you're seeing it, you're smelling it, and that's called orthonasal olfaction, so through the nostrils. You might be hearing something sizzle or hearing the pop of a can. That plays in, and you're touching it, usually with your fingers. You're touching something and you're getting an idea of what the texture is. Your brain is already set in real time integrating that information before it even goes into your mouth and saying, is this new? Have I seen this before? Did I have an adverse reaction to this before? AKA, did you drink too much and throw up and now you don't eat a certain food, right? Nobody does that. Or do I have some sort of learned predilection? Like last time I ate this, I was able to do all this work, AKA caffeine. We learned caffeine is one of the most bitter molecules known to man. Did you guys have caffeine this morning
Yes.
to wake you butt up?
Yeah. 2.5 cups.
Okay, right? So bitter. You should not like coffee. We love it because we've learned, like, okay, yes, this is going to lead me to wake my butt up and get the things done I need to get done, especially during the dark season when light doesn't wake us up.
Right.
So it's taking in all this information, and then it's pulling in other things like, what's my hunger level? What's my salt level right now? So this is where some of the cravings come in, Roy, where you were talking about. And then finally, you're going to start bringing in some of the things that scientists really have a hard time studying, which is the human element. How does your cultural background bring into this? Nostalgia, memories, things like that. The food hasn't even gone in your mouth yet.
Right.
So now food goes in your mouth. You have the sense of taste, which is the sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami, possibly fatty acids, and possibly some of these other guys. You're getting retronasal olfaction, which retro means behind. Olfaction, of course, is the nose. So retronasal. So it's basically as you chew food, you're warming it up. It's getting aerosolized, and it goes up the back of your throat to your olfactory bulbs.
Okay.
So for someone who's like, I don't understand what you're saying, Dr. Nicole, did you ever laugh so hard that root beer or milk came out your nose? That's the path. Okay.
Well, I'll tell you the other one that I always think about when you say that is wasabi.
Yes, the
Because if
burn.
you get so much, it seemed like it'll burn all the way to the back of your throat and back up into your nose.
Yes, which it's almost like we've met each other before, and which is the last thing that happens in your mouth, which is mouthfeel, which is the sense of touch. It's still part of your touch system, so part of the 5 senses, but it's going to be pain, which is what's going on with the wasabi. You're actually
Oh yeah.
nociceptors. Nociceptors are your pain receptors in your body, which is why your face gets red, your nose starts running because your capillaries are starting to open, and so everything just starts going haywire depending on how sensitive you are. So it's pain, temperature, and texture is the sense of mouth feel in your mouth, the sense of touch.
Okay.
So then your brain's still integrating. It's like, cool, now I have these new clues. Again, are they new? Are they old? What's going on? And then your brain's gonna decide, do you eat it? Do you spit it out? Do you eat more? And so on and so forth. So the questions around, is this genetically determined? Taste preferences are innate at birth. Babies, I always joke, babies don't like IPAs. Okay, babies don't like bitter. So you are born not liking bitter, not liking salt, and sour somewhere in the middle. And we talked a little bit about this when we, in the last episode we did together on the mental health fitness tips. But then umami and sweet, those guys, you have a predilection for right out of the gate. So in the womb, these are forming. So there's a genetic basis of these that's very different than smell. Smells are learned. There is no, believe it or not, there is no one smell that everyone in the world says we all agree that's pleasant. And there's no one smell, there's some exceptions possibly, I won't get into them, that for the most part, humans all agree is not pleasant. And so smell is learned. Now we're talking about not the ability to smell, we're talking about liking. So this is a big difference. There's your ability to detect something, and that's genetic. And then if you like it, and at what level, at what concentration you like it. For taste, right out of the gate, you're born with it. For smell, you learn it over the years. And really you learn it in the womb first. And you also, looks like there is some evidence that you learn to appreciate spicy food or have a tolerance for spicy food in the womb as well.
Okay, the dogs are protesting.
The dogs are saying, I want the food you're talking about.
They are so mad. They're kind of shut up in a room, and they don't like that.
Yeah, they're like, no. I know. I had Stu take the kid and the dog. They left. I need to look professional or sound.
We need Stu.
So Roy, there's not a connection in terms of the genetics. So XY, which versus XX. So XY makes a guy, right. XX makes a gal in terms of the genetic sex of a baby. These genes aren't on those genes. So there's maybe some other connection that's going on that could be explored about why ladies were choosing the salty sour product. And there's a variety of things that could go into that, going back to hunger level and macro and micronutrients. Typically the salty stuff is going to be picked when you sweat a lot or you need to do something to balance homeostasis. So that's why a lot of athletes drink pickle juice to replenish their electrolytes.
Oh, okay.
So maybe
I've never heard of that.
Smarter after their sports practice.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, helps them concentrate.
Yeah, they were smarter. I can tell you that for sure. They still
Roy, so we answered the pickle question and we talked about it from the genetic perspective. There was one other one that I think you asked that I can't remember if we answered.
The one was just the confusion between, as you're bringing it up, the smell may signal one way or the other where your taste is actually something different.
Yeah, so we are beginning to really understand what's called crossmodal sensory interactions, which is how does one sense either literally affect physically or cognitively in the brain affect the perception of something else. So let me give you an example of that. And this is these are some of the things that when I work with food companies, they like to know, which is, for example, in the US, we associate vanilla, cinnamon, and strawberry and the color red with sweet. So I can give you a drink that has no sugar in it and make it smell like strawberry and make it red, and you're going to tell me this is sweet.
Wow, interesting.
Cultural. It's learned.
Ah.
So that's cognitive. So that's happening in the brain. So other things that can happen is that's more physical is, for example, spicy. When you have spicy food, there's evidence to show that when you activate mouthfeel and that pain reception in your mouth, it does something to increase, I don't know if it's your awareness or is it actually the taste cells sending signals to the brain, we don't know where, taste and smell perception goes up. Which is why you can use spicy food, add more spices as you're decreasing salt and sugar and things, and still get that same reward. So yes, there's interactions between all of the sensory systems, and there's even interactions within sensory systems. So chefs know this very well. You add a little bit of salt, it picks up the sweet, and it decreases the bitter. Sweet and bitter are antagonists. They decrease each other. So not only are your senses interacting in some way, shape, or form, and your brain's integrating it, which is wild, even within one sense, like the sense of taste, you're having these interactions that are occurring that almost don't make sense because you're like, no, I know I have this much salt and I know I have this much sweet, but I'm getting actually this feeling of it.
Right. And it's a good one to talk about for just a minute too, because there's a major fast food chain that along the way, they figured that out, is that if they would soak their French fries in sugar water, then it becomes addictive. And it does. I mean, it's hard if you know that and you taste it, you can kind of pick that up. But for years and years, I never picked up that sweetness of them. Mm-hmm. Now I understand why they are so addictive. Not only the salt, but the sugar.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Because now it's kind of like you're being, for lack of a better word, kind of tricked, because it's not high enough that you're cognitively perceiving it, only because there's a lot of other things going on. Usually, if it's drive-through or something like that, you're eating in the car, so your brain's paying attention to other things. You've got the salt, so you're not really being like, these are sweet French fries. And yet you're having a physiological reaction that says, oh, that was energy.
Yeah.
And energy used to be really hard to find. So humans really like eating sugar, even when you don't even realize it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And the other thing, I guess the converse of that is when me personally, I will say when I cut my sugar, when I'm watching my intake, only maybe eating more natural sugars like, fruit and stuff, then all of a sudden that the natural sweetness of foods is very, very amplified. All of a sudden you'll eat something. One thing, I think it's carrots that are very noticeable, but you eat them, and like, wow, that was just like almost eating a candy bar. It was so sweet.
Yes, and I have many of friends who study what's going on with dopamine in the brain and the reward system that is part of when you have intake of sugar. And it's true. That reward system, you basically need to go higher and higher to get that hit. So when you start decreasing, your perception is going to change with it, especially if you're doing it mindfully, and it's going to change your behavior, which then changes your perception, and so on and so forth. So it's either a beautiful cycle or a negative feedback loop of perception and mindfulness, and what you're doing changes behavior, and behavior changes perception, and so on and so forth. And I've noticed the same thing with tracking. We talked about this quite a bit last time. With tracking food, I'm like, oh, wow, that has that in it. And it's making, when I do decide to do it, not out of habit, not reaching for things out of habit, when I decide to eat that peanut butter, I don't even know what it was, peanut butter chocolate something from Cold Stone. Oh my gosh, even this is the smallest.
Oh, that's
it has like a billion calories. Oh my gosh. But when I decide to do that because it's special, because I was out with my 5-year-old and we went to sushi together and then we were going to go see a movie, the reward I got from that was out of control. Whereas before, I used to just eat those all the time and be like, oh, no big deal. So their behavior can change perception, can change behavior in a very positive feedback loop when you're mindful of it. And those decreasing of taking in both salt and sugar, both of those things, your body then recognizes that and realizes that you don't need the same concentration in order to get that same hit. And probably I wonder, Roy, too, for salt. For me, things taste, if I get takeout food now, it tastes so salty to me.
Right, exactly.
Yes. anything all that packaged
All the
stuff.
pack,
It's
yeah.
just so,
Yeah.
it just tastes so different now that we know everything that's in it.
Yeah.
Well, and she bought some, I don't know what they're called. They're like they're blue natural chips. I get, maybe
Oh,
it's
just blue tortilla
it may
chips.
be
Yeah.
yeah, it may be a marketing gimmick, but supposedly they're a little better for you on carbs than regular. But when we had a bag of those, it was like, wow, that was like eating a block of salt, is exactly what I thought. You know,
Yeah.
because we had been watching our salt intake so closely that, and it really wasn't that much when we looked at the label, but just a little bit of elevation in the intake really was a lot.
Yeah, and they were even, I think they were even, there were some that were salt-free. I've gotten both, that had just lightly salted, but the
Yeah.
salt-free ones were good too. It was just we needed the crunch.
Yeah, and I don't want to deteriorate too far off the subject. Just one more thing while we're talking about this is that, when a couple of years ago when I was diagnosed with diabetes, I kind of goofed around with not really understanding the impacts of carbs and how much you ate when you ate them, all that. And so, after a couple months, I went back to the doctor and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, you haven't fixed or changed anything. I'm like, yeah. So anyway, that's when he told me, he's like, stay between this level of carbs, which was pretty low. So he did that on like a Wednesday or Thursday. And then Saturday, I was out in the yard and I really thought I was dying. I thought my blood pressure was so high and I felt like my head was fixing, the top of my head was going to blow off. I went up, got my blood pressure checked. I mean, I was scared. So I made an appointment, went in Monday, and he was just laughing. He's like, carbs are like drugs. He said they are addictive and you are just coming down off of them. Oh my God. But it was the worst feeling. But that's I guess that's what gets some of us like me in trouble, because you become addicted to, that salt, that sugar, and then you need more and more and more until you just do too much.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And then, like we talked about, it's there starts with what's going on in the genetics and how you're even detecting it. And then from there, it's the things that you've taught your brain.
Yeah.
And sometimes we teach our brains not the right things that we should be. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, there's some really cool research I found fascinating, which was, and I can't remember the researcher's name now, I think it was out of Florida, where they looked at how much somebody anticipated the reward of a milkshake, and they were looking at it from lean, overweight, and obese as a point of taking in carbohydrates, and then how much reward they got from it. And it was this terrible cycle of that the obesity was leading to a higher thought of reward, anticipation of reward, and then not hitting it when you ate it, and then wanting more. And it was just like, and it was a study that was done with teenage girls, which was really fascinating. And I just thought, oh my gosh. And then there was another study they did where you can call the same thing healthy or a treat, same exact thing. And your brain's going to be like, I don't want the one that's healthy. It's the same exact milkshake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some really interesting neuroscience that I feel like the more you know about, you're like, I'm going to retrain my brain.
Pay more attention. Yeah. Be more mindful. Oh my gosh.
And that's what it comes down to, is the mindfulness, not only in what and why you want it and when, and making that a decision and not out of habit, but also then the mindfulness while you're eating and really letting your brain be like, wow, this is really good for what it is, and not having it go down so quick that you're not even paying attention.
Yeah, that's another good thing to kind of hit on too, is I am an extremely was a fast eater. I've learned to slow down, but I grew up with, there's a bunch of guys that we rodeoed together and went down the road. And so whenever, there'd be 8 or 10 guys. And if there was a bite left on your plate, if they got through first, they would eat it. And so like, self-preservation, you just had to eat as fast as you possibly could to get your meal down. And stuck with me over the years. Sometimes I catch myself, it's how fast I'm eating, but I think that helps is to slow down and mindfully taste the food, the texture, you know, what is it? Is it salty? Is it sweet? And try to enjoy it, I guess.
Is that why I get the stink eye sometimes when we're finishing up dinner? It's like, don't be looking at my plate. Oh my
You know,
goodness.
one of the things that comes up too is the slower and more mindful you eat. It's not just about what's in feeling it in the mouth and the taste, but you're actually having better airflow between your mouth and your nose. And
Oh,
so you're
okay.
going to get a lot more perception of aromas, which makes things more complicated, which, you know, complex in your brain, which
Right.
leads to higher levels of satiety. So, or
Yeah, and
satiety.
there's a little bit of delay too from the, I guess, the receptors that tell you you're full. So, you know, what else I've heard is if you eat, the slower you eat, you give that time to catch up and signal, where if you eat fast, you just kind of eat past it and you get the signal somewhere down the road that, hey, I'm full. But that was about 15 minutes ago.
Yep. Yep. I think you're totally right when I think about that. And that was the hardest thing that I had when I started working with a nutrition coach. The hardest thing that I had was understanding portion controls because I would eat so fast. And I realized that exactly what you said, Roy. When I slow down, I don't need to have seconds because I'm actually already full.
Right. Yeah, and it's just I've learned too. It's even if I can eat the right amount of food, if I eat it all at the same time or eat it later in the evening. So we have to be mindful of the quantity and portion size as well. But so how can we take these the taste and how can we, I guess, use that to our advantage to try to eat right and or maybe even look at how we could not fall into the trap of eating wrong or too much by the knowledge of what we know.
Yeah, from the taste perspective, I think the biggest thing that helps as a starting point is just recognizing and not judging how many tablespoons of sugar do you take in a day? Like just really understanding. And I'm not talking like, you know, nobody eats a tablespoon of sugar. Okay, maybe some people do. I don't know. Most people don't. But understanding the sugar that's in what you eat and just starting there. Same thing for salt, although salt is so much harder. I've had a much easier time limiting sugar than I've been able to limit salt, but they're both there. Just get a feel for it. Like, okay, what am I taking in? And from there, recognizing what is the not only filling, but fulfilling for you. And usually the way that can work is by doing it mindfully, which we've talked about. You're going to get more of the hits of the more fulfilling foods like protein. So making sure you're getting that protein, but doing it in a way where whatever your protein source is, you're doing it a little in a dry browning situation so that you get that brown crust. Okay. That's called the Maillard reaction. And that's an interaction with some of the sugars and that's going on with some of the fat and a low water content. That is going to give you a huge hit of umami. And that umami hit tells your brain, oh, this is the good stuff. Like this is high density, high good caloric protein. So you want to pay attention more to those things and create your meals more around that big, thick, wonderful, juicy, savory umami flavor. Maybe a little bit of sugar, maybe a little bit of salt. And then really play on the spices in order to bring in aromatics. You really want to get the complex and complexity of the smells and then the textures. So textures play a big role in you figuring out like, oh, does this feel full or not? Which is part of the reason why, even though I'm trying to get 100 grams of protein a day, sometimes I can't get it and I'll do a protein shake. The non-chewing means I'm not sending those signals to my brain and my stomach that these things are coming. And it can have a feedback that means you're not going to feel it. Not only is it not filling, but it's not fulfilling.
Right.
So that's how we can think about it from a taste perspective is how can you kick up the umami? Well, this is going to be for savory dishes. Kick up the umami. For non-savory dishes, like thinking more breakfast, the creamier a non-fat dairy product is, for example, your brain will think it's sweeter.
Okay.
So you really want to go for if you get like the non-fat European style yogurts that are like you could just pour them, your brain's like, what is that?
Right.
If you get the Greek one and it's 0% fat, your brain's like, wow, that tastes sweeter. That is more fulfilling. So it's tricking your brain in a lot of ways, kind of like food companies do, but you're going to do it for yourself for good reasons.
Sugar fries.
Yeah, it's sugar fries, but you're doing it in order to have your brain and your body say, this is filling and fulfilling. And there's ways that you can trick it by doing that. I do want to mention that we talked about the taste of fat. And there's a lot of confusion about the taste of fat. So when you think of fat, what foods come to mind? Like what fatty foods come to mind? Chocolate.
Steak fat. Steak fat and chocolate. I don't know why. I'm getting really hungry talking about
ice cream.
That big juicy.
So all of those things that we just talked about, and this is what normally Americans will think about as fats, those are saturated fats. There isn't a lot of evidence that there is a taste for saturated fats. The taste of fat that has been studied for 30 plus years is unsaturated fats.
Okay.
And it's really interesting because by themselves, they don't taste great. And they have the ability to go rancid pretty quickly, which you might have noticed, like if you open like olive oil or some of these other better fats, you're like, whoa, like they tell you, keep it in the fridge. Not the olive oil is hard, but so they go bad pretty quickly. So the taste of fat that we have evidence for is unsaturated fatty acids. And when you can taste it, it's usually an indication that it's gone bad. So originally we thought, of course you would need to taste this. These are good fats. Your body needs them. You can't make them. And it turns out that they are so often incorporated with other things. The only time that you can taste them really is if they've gone bad, and it's an indication to you not to eat it because it's rancid. So that's our theory about why we've evolved to taste fat in a survival perspective. And it's totally mind-blowing because normally you would think, no, that's something we need. So we should like the taste of it.
Right.
But when you taste it in your food, the particular molecules, the actual fatty acid molecules. So I'm not talking about like the taste of avocado when you have avocado oil, or the taste of macadamia nut when you have macadamia nut oils. Like those are the main flavors that are incorporated there. I'm actually talking the pure taste of the fatty acid, like linoleic acid or oleic acid. For the most part, it looks like we evolved to only taste them when they are not good anymore. Yeah. So you don't eat something that's been hanging out for a long time and get sick and die.
Yeah, and I guess that's part of, I assume that why the taste evolved, or we had some to begin with, and why they've evolved is that survival. I mean, we needed I guess the meat had to be cured, so it was salty to let us know it was probably good to eat, and then this rancid.
Well, it would be way even before that, Roy. So our developing taste for salt would have been long before humans were curing things with salt.
Oh, really?
Salt wasn't, because salt wasn't as easy to get in that time. So it's even before that. Yeah. So it's really interesting to think about that when you think about our tastes from the perspective of survival and evolution, you can really think to yourself, it's doing one of two things. It's either driving me towards something that I need to survive in a harsh environment, which we do no longer live in, or it's protecting me from something that could potentially hurt me, which also doesn't serve us because there's so many vegetables that are bitter, for example, that aren't poisonous. And we're thinking about unsaturated fats, it's a big mystery for us to understand why it's an aversive taste. And when we know we need it, but it's because it had to do more with a complex food potentially going bad. Yeah. So, and then again, salt and sour are these weird things in the middle that it depends on the concentration about whether it depends on the concentration of if you detect it, at what concentration, and then at what concentration do you like it the best? Yeah.
Well, interesting.
Yeah. Now I'm on brain overload now. Sensory overload. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's what I've got to figure out is how, to turn these vegetables into something that I like, because it's just, I cannot make myself like them. It's hard. And I have to give Terry credit, she does a lot of seasoning and a lot of things to try to make them more edible. But you know, some of it, like you said, it's that texture. Some of it is the knowing. Sometimes she won't tell me what we're fixing to have, but it's, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this eating besides just the, you know, the actual taste of the food. That doesn't hurt it, but there's, you know, I think the psychological part about just vegetables and
Agreed.
yeah.
And he still will eat it, you know, he still says, oh, this is the best thing I've ever had. Before he takes his first bite, you know.
And that brings us back to what we talked about right at the beginning. Roy, you are basically saying, I am in charge of my behaviors. I'm making these choices. And it's a long slog, it feels like, but those choices that you make in your behaviors are going to eventually start retraining your brain. And that perception will change. And you'll get to the point where all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, I guess, I don't even put salt on that anymore. I don't add sugar to that. Yep.
Now I was the worst about that. You know, salt went on everything before we even tasted it, salt, pepper. But now, very rarely, you know, we do while we're cooking, but not at once it's been plated. No more salt on it.
Yep.
Yeah, not as much. I mean, just a little bit now. But when we first started this, you know, so many months, I don't even know how many months. It seems like forever. But when we first started, you know, we cut out all salt and just tried to flavor it with everything. But you have to have a little bit.
You just do it a little bit. Yep. And that's what I'm finding now. Now that I've been really patient with myself and I've worked on understanding and being mindful of, you know, what it is I'm putting in my body and enjoying it at that moment. I'm realizing, yes, I can add a little brown sugar to my oatmeal. Absolutely. That's fine. I can add a little salt here. I think, you know, the real take home is that our brains are these amazing machines and flavors in the brain. And you have the ability to do this, to stop it being habit and start it being that you're making these active choices that will then retrain your brain. And I think I really do think that's the big take home of understanding the flavors in the brain and how all the senses play in and all the 5+ tastes fit in.
Yeah. So like a regular habit, they will say 21 days to retrain your brain. Do you feel that the same goes with food? But, you know, something that we do every day, you know, we may not eat broccoli cooked the same way 3 times a day, all day, every day for 21 days. So would we suspect that it may take us longer to retrain?
I do for 2 reasons. One, because like you said, humans crave variety in what we eat. And so this isn't something where you can train yourself to drink a glass of water every morning as soon as you wake up and you're going to be good, which is also a good habit. And also because you're fighting against hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. So that doesn't turn off without you really being intentional about it and helping you get there. Like it's just not going to happen. Yeah.
All right. Well, Dr. Nicole, again, it's been such a pleasure visiting. And every time we talk, I feel that you and Terry must be, again, at some level, just.
We do need to go on a trip. I'm telling you, if I could sock you away in my suitcase, I certainly would.
We'll leave the dogs and the kids with Roy and Stu.
Oh my God.
That's right.
Yeah, I was asking her, who are you more worried about surviving this 2 weeks? Me or the dogs? I hope we can all make it. Well, tell everybody how they can reach out and get a hold of you and what you can do. I know that you do a lot of speaking and you do a lot of working with food companies. So just let everybody know how they can reach out.
All right. Folks can find me on Instagram at Doc Garneau, DOCGARNEAU. And then from there is where I do lots of different postings and same handle on Facebook too. And my Facebook stuff, as Terry knows, is kind of the more personal, vulnerable side of Doc Garneau, where I do a lot more around food and speaking and consulting on my Instagram.
Okay. So what is something, we asked you this last time, but it's been a couple of days, so I kind of forgot, but what is a tool, habit, ritual, what is something that you do every day, either in your business life or personal life, that you don't feel that you could do without?
I can't believe I'm going to say this because I was so scared to start working out again. I will never put working out second. I do it. I always say that do the hardest thing first. And when I was, more in my corporate land, that was very different, right? Like writing reports or doing something you were dreading. And now it's not that it makes it any easier, but I feel like I have somehow more mental confidence in myself and I'm showing up. And so I do my workout first thing. And don't get me wrong, the days that I have rest days, I'm like, oh, hallelujah. I don't have to do nothing. But I can't even remember to say that because that's not been my thing. And it still is the hardest thing I need to do. But when I do that, everything else is icing on the cake after the day.
Yeah.
I
It's a mountain.
And there's been a lot of talk about that, between us and some of our other guests lately, is just that taking the time for yourself to get out, even if it's just a walk, clear your head. That's so good for not only it's good for your health, it's good to reduce stress, and it's also good for your creativity. I think that's when we take a brain break and just do something like that that's a little mindless. That's when we have some of our better ideas.
Absolutely. So I continue to do the hard thing first, but that keeps evolving as my life changes. And right now it's working out.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, thanks again. We look forward to talking to you again soon. So hope you'll come back and join us again. But again, this is Feeding Fatty. You can find us at www.feedingfatty.com. We're on all the major platforms: iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Pandora. If we're not on your major platform that you listen to, please reach out, let us know. Also, if you have a good story about weight loss, getting healthy, we'd love to hear from you. Or if you're a professional that works with people helping them out, love to hear from you as well. Also, you can find us on normal places: Facebook, Twitter,
YouTube.
Instagram, and also YouTube. We have now started, I don't advertise that enough, but we've now started putting recordings of our tapings up live. So check us out there. Until next time, take care of each other. I'm Roy.
I'm Terry. Thank you, Dr. Nicole. Great to see you.